Hello, departure, Global 376, Gulfport point 4 for 7,000.
Government 76, Governor, departure, climb and maintain 15,000.
Well, just like every other flight I'd had for 42 years, Flight 1549 was routine.
Cactus 337, turn left 360.
Left 360,
climb maintain 15,000.
But the routine flight becomes the challenge of a lifetime. Captain Chesley B. Sullenberger III gives us an exclusive look behind the scenes of his historic flight.
We're almost to waypoint 5. We're almost to the point where we hit the birds.
This is Cactus 1539. Hit birds, returning back towards LaGuardia.
Captain Sullenberger flies the exact same path of Flight 1549 and tells his story in chilling detail.
So I'm still in the left turn, and all you see in between here and the runway is buildings and development.
Sully transmits the international distress call. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
Stop your departures, got emergency returning.
When he said he lost thrust in both engines, it's like your mind immediately goes into overdrive.
We're out of time. We're out of airspeed. We're out of ideas. This is it.
Cactus 1529, can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it. We're going to be nuts.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus?
I'm gonna die in 90 seconds. You know, and I'm looking out a window and I'm gonna freaking die.
Everyone was waiting with bated breath to see what the pilot was gonna say.
I say this is the captain, brace for impact.
In June 2009, U.S. Airways pilot Chesley Sullenberger attends a reunion. The last time Sully saw this aircraft, it was still floating in the middle of New York's Hudson River after a flock of Canada geese forced it out of the sky.
My sense is that the bird struck the airplane in a lot of areas. The fuselage, the wings, the engines, but I don't know.
There wasn't time to wonder. For the crew and passengers aboard Flight 1549, there was only time to act. On January 15th, 2009, 150 people make their way through a cold winter's day to New York's LaGuardia Airport for a flight to North Carolina. Captain Sully Sullenberger and First Officer Jeffrey Skiles are the pilots on board U.S. Airways Flight 1549. Flight 1549 left New York's LaGuardia Airport at 3:25 p.m. that day, headed for Charlotte, North Carolina. 2 pilots, 3 flight attendants, and 150 passengers buckle up for the flight.
We've been doing this trip for, God, I don't know, guys, 8 years. This is kind of like a tradition for us.
Jimbo, you know what you're doing? Your face looks on fire.
George Morgado, Jeff Koloje, his father Rob,
Lobsters are next, right?
Jim Stefanik, Dave Carlos, and Rick Delisle are friends and relatives from Chicopee, Massachusetts. They are headed to North Carolina for their annual golf vacation when they buy the last 6 tickets on 1549.
I was the first person to board the aircraft. I saw the entire crew. I looked at all the passengers. I always like to analyze people when they come on the plane. It was very much a business crowd that day, and everybody had winter coats and gloves and scarves.
Over the drone of jet engines, the passengers receive a standard safety briefing about what to do in the event of an emergency.
I fly a lot for business in general, but I've never been a good flyer. I've always been a little bit scared every time. It just doesn't feel natural being in something that big.
And I've flown out of LaGuardia probably no fewer than 50 times. Is you kind of come around runway 2 there and you see Donald Trump's plane out to the left.
Yeah, I remember that.
So to me, it was just a normal day. Open up the New York Post.
In the cockpit, Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Skiles prepare for takeoff.
Every flight has its own challenges. Every flight's just a little bit different. I would have been looking out, following the center line, of the taxiway, the yellow stripe, steering the tiller. Jeff would have been talking to ground control and getting our taxi clearances, making sure we knew the taxi route and where to stop to wait for other planes to pass ahead of us.
Flight 1549 heads out on runway 4 into some of the busiest airspace in the United States.
Once I had positioned the airplane on the runway, I would have said to Jeff, your aircraft, and at that point when we were cleared for takeoff, he would have pushed the thrust levers up, he would be steering the airplane, and he would be making the takeoff.
The pilots swap legs. Every other leg you fly, you're either the pilot flying or the pilot monitoring, depending on your role in that particular leg. And this was just my turn in the barrel to fly the airplane.
Well, just like every other flight I had for 42 years, Flight 1549 was routine. It was unremarkable for about the first 90 seconds or 2 minutes.
About 3,000 feet, something caught my eye, and I focused on it, and I saw a line of birds. Initially, I was shocked, but then I saw them kind of descend in our windshield. I thought we were going to fly over the top of them. I remember this great sense of relief. But, of course, the cockpit is above the wings and the engines, and then we heard them thud against the airplane. It was like hail. By the time you see a bird, it's already too late to do anything because the airplane just does not maneuver that fast.
Jeff and I felt, heard abnormally loud noises, abnormally severe vibrations coming from both engines simultaneously. It sounded bad.
You threw sneakers in the dryer and turned it on. That's what the engine sounded like for a little while. And then it just kind of went silent, and everyone's kind of just looking at each other. There's no screaming. The plane never really dropped. But you're like, this is different than any other flight I've ever been on.
Instantly, both engines went back to idle. And, you could imagine, 3 minutes, you're focused on other things, you're flying the airplane, and that quickly, suddenly, you have no power at low altitude over New York City.
So I was into my paperback novel, and there was a loud explosion or boom, and then the whole plane got really quiet.
I heard absolutely no noise coming from either engine. The aircraft became filled with smoke and this horrible, horrible stench.
But it smelled like fuel and electrical burn. We have no control over what's going to happen, so everyone was waiting with bated breath to see what the pilot was going to say, and it seemed like a really long time before any word came from the cockpit.
As captain, it was my responsibility in this dire emergency, so I chose to take control. I announced to Jeff using our protocol, my aircraft. Jeff replied with his part of the protocol saying, your aircraft. I lowered the nose to attain and maintain a safe flying speed. And of course, I made a radio call. I said, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Cactus 1549.
Hit birds, so you've lost thrust on both engines, returning back towards LaGuardia.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left heading up 220.
220.
On the ground, 1549 is followed by controller Patrick Harton at a radar tracking facility, New York Tracon. Harton assists Captain Sullenberger with options.
Right away, when he said he lost thrust in both engines, my heart was pounding through my chest. It was just, I got hyper-focused right away. It was just like all of a sudden, I had to go from 0 to 60 and nothing flat.
At the same time, air traffic controllers at LaGuardia Airport have their eyes on 1549. Bill McLaughlin is in the tower and watches the events unfold.
So as I was standing in this position, I was able to see the aircraft acquiring at the George Washington Bridge, and we saw them at approximately 900 feet. Then we watched the target tick off, going 800 feet, 700 feet. Right out here, if you take a look out the window, you can see the two stanchions sticking out of the horizon for the George Washington Bridge, and it was between these two clusters of buildings along the horizon there, just over the Rikers Island Bridge, that we spotted the aircraft, and we knew it was low. So we just grabbed the binoculars to make sure that it wasn't anything else, took a look out there, and we were able to identify that it was an Airbus, in fact, and that it was low on the horizon. That's very, very low altitude.
Jeff and I followed the primary fundamental rules of flying, which is first, maintain aircraft control. I was choosing a safe flight path to maintain a safe flying speed. I reached up and started the auxiliary power unit, the APU.
The APU is a backup source for electrical power, but it does not produce any thrust. On this day, the APU is keeping 1549's instruments powered while Sully makes decisions about where to land the crippled aircraft.
Tremendous distractions would have been occurring on the flight deck at that time just because of all the warnings that would have been issued by the aircraft itself, letting them know that there was failures that were occurring as a result of the catastrophic loss of both engines.
Larry Rooney is a safety expert and an accident investigator for the U.S. Airline Pilots Association. He's involved in the investigation of Flight 1549.
It's the crew had to basically formulate a plan. I mean, they had to come up with a way out of this very dire emergency in 30 seconds. This was a real pressure cooker for these guys. I mean, they were up against it with all the things that they had going wrong and the limited time that they had available to them to be able to get this airplane safely back, on the ground.
For the first time since the incident, Captain Sullenberger flies the exact route of Flight 1549 and tells how he and First Officer Skiles handled the emergency.
The turn on the ignition, start the APU, begin a left turn, start looking at the landmarks to figure out where we are and what the possibilities are. And it's happening about as fast as I'm saying that. Look out back at the runway, way far away, a lot of buildings, a lot of development. Had we landed short at all, even a few feet, would have been catastrophic. Heading toward LaGuardia and then not being able to make it, I've eliminated the possibility of going anywhere else. It's an irrevocable choice.
From runway 13 in LaGuardia, there's a long approach light system that extends out from the end of the runway on the pilings. If the airplane had landed short, it would have landed into those approach lights, which would have impaled the aircraft. And as you can see by looking at the runway, there's very little margin for error on either side.
LaGuardia was on Sully's side of the airplane. I really couldn't see that. Teterboro, maybe, maybe not, but the problem is the maybe not has, such huge detriments that you can't even risk it.
You've got highways that basically ring the airport. You've got large storage facilities that are there. There's just really no margin for error whatsoever for the Teterboro Airport. And the fact that the crew was unfamiliar with it, they'd be basically going there in the blind.
Sully weighs the options. In less than 3 minutes, Flight 1549 becomes a cornerstone for one of the most remarkable days in aviation history. Captain Sully Sullenberger and First Officer Jeff Skiles are the pilots aboard Flight 1549 from New York's LaGuardia Airport on its way to Charlotte, North Carolina. Just moments into the flight, Sully is in control of a plane where both engines lose thrust after striking a flock of Canada geese. How Captain Sullenberger handles Flight 1549, though, comes from years of experience, dating back to discipline he says he gained while attending the United States Air Force Academy.
My experience at the Academy inspired me. I think it led me to have very high expectations of myself. I think that my entire life experience contributed in one way or another to January 15th. And the glider experience here at the Academy certainly was a part of that.
Sully was our #1 aviation cadet here. He's an aviator extraordinaire, extremely professional, well-studied, well-schooled in the art and science of aviation. And he really brought the excellence in everything that he did to the table in this one act.
Between the glider program and the powered flight program, I flew 1,000 hours as a cadet here at the Air Force Academy in the 4 years I attended. So I was down there a lot at the airfield. I spent a lot of time there. It was a great place to learn. As to how that affected the events on January 15th, it's difficult to say. The flying characteristics of gliders, the light airplanes, are so very different than of modern, large, high-speed jet transports.
Skytrain 5 Alpha Fox, request 34 left.
5 Alpha Fox, runway 34 left, wind 320 with 14, clear to land.
every landing is essentially gliding to a certain extent. It's a big difference on January 15th, is that we had no thrust instead of a little thrust that we normally use as we approach the airport for landing. And so the rate of descent was necessarily faster, and the approach angle was steeper.
Which means that Captain Sullenberger's glide in a 76-ton airliner doesn't give him much time. The passengers aboard 1549 are counting on his ability to make every second count toward a successful outcome.
Tower, stop your departure. He's got emergency returning. Who is it? It's 1529. He bird strike. He lost the thrust in the engines. He's returning immediately.
Cactus 1529. Which engines?
He lost thrust in both engines, he said.
Got it.
This is Sully's first look at the path he flew with Flight 1549 since he landed the aircraft on that January day.
My initial focus is maintaining aircraft control. I take control of the airplane and lower the nose to attain this safe flying speed.
The conversation captured by New York TRACON will chill pilots and controllers for years to come.
Cactus 1529. We can get it to you. Do you want to try to land runway 13?
We're unable. We may end up in the Hudson.
Hi, Cactus 1549. It's going to be left traffic to runway 31.
Unable.
Okay, what do you need to land? Cactus 1549. Runway 4 is available if you want to make left traffic to runway 4.
I'm not sure we can make any runway. What's over to our right? Anything in New Jersey? Maybe Teterboro?
Okay, yeah, off your right side is Teterboro Airport. Do you want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
Teterboro, Empire, actually, LaGuardia departure guy, emergency inbound.
Hey, go ahead.
Cactus 1529 over the George Washington Bridge, wants to go to the airport right now.
Wants to go to our airport. Check. Does he need assistance?
Yes, it was a bird strike. Can I get him in for runway 1?
Runway 1, that's good.
Cactus 1529, turn right 280, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus?
And those are the words that I couldn't, my mind did not want to comprehend that. For the life of me, I've tried to come to grips with that. It's one of the things, you hear the replay, he says it clear as day. But I guess because what I felt was the finality of a statement like that, my mind just didn't want to comprehend that. Like, I didn't want it to be over, you know? I wanted him to make it to a runway and make it safely.
And he's clicking out of 500, 400, 300, and right about where you see this 1,000-foot target is where he was no longer under radar coverage. To tell you the truth, we still thought that he was airborne. We thought that he was just below the skyline, below radar coverage, and that's why he went into coast track. We're still fully expecting that he's going to come around and make an approach to runway 4.
The only option, the only place in the whole metropolitan area long enough, wide enough, smooth enough to land a jet airliner is the river. There's just no other place to go. We're out of time. We're out of airspeed. We're out of ideas. This is it.
We were using gravity to provide the forward motion of the airplane since the engines were not producing usable thrust. And of course, the faster my forward speed, the greater the rate of descent.
No, I know there's 4 airports within 15-mile radius over there, so I thought we were all right. I know the captain will pull this off. I don't know how he's going to do it.
For me, it was a numb helplessness of, you got to be kidding. This isn't happening. They're going to make it back. Come on. I don't want to be 3,000 feet in the air and then be falling out of the sky.
In the cockpit, Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Skiles are focused on the Hudson River. It might appear as an empty runway, but passenger jets are not built to land on water.
I was thinking that somehow we're going to get some power back on these engines and we're going to be arriving back at a gate. That's what's always happened. That's what it's always been, you know. And so I was always expecting to do that. It was probably once, only maybe the last minute or so, that I finally focused on the fact that that wasn't going to happen and that we were going to have to land in the river.
To land on water at that speed, I mean, there was going to be an impact on touchdown. There's just no way around it. I mean, you've got that much mass moving at that speed, you know, hitting something fairly solid at this point.
Sully faces incalculable odds for a successful water landing. The situation is dire.
4718. I think he said he was going in the Hudson.
Yeah, it was the Cactus. He was just north of the George Washington Bridge when they had the bird strike.
Yeah, that was pretty much the worst feeling I think I've ever had in my life, right there. Right about now.
Okay, thank you.
Lost radar for good. He's dropping off the scope. At this point, the towers were already coordinating with the Coast Guard and the Port Authority police and everything to try to assist them because they knew they were going down in the Hudson, and there was nothing else that I could do at this point.
Now the controllers can only sit back and wait and hope for a miracle. There is a quiet aboard Flight 1549. Passengers can only watch as Captain Sullenberger guides the crippled aircraft closer and closer to the freezing Hudson River.
We're at 200 knots. We're descending at over 1,000 to 1,500 feet per minute. I see that the ground is coming up, the buildings are coming up toward us, the earth is coming up fast.
You could have heard a pin drop in the cabin. No one was saying anything. There were no prayers at that point. It was all, hold your breath and wait till someone tells us what's going on.
Looking out the window, you can see the skyline of New York City, and it's getting lower and lower. So we at that time knew we were going to end up in the water.
So right about now, I say this is the captain, brace for impact. We're at 1,100 feet, 200 knots.
When he finally said brace for impact, I think that's when everyone realized, so we're crashing. No real screaming, no panic. It was really just quiet, prayers to themselves.
I was watching other people, seeing if they were bracing, how they were bracing, looking at my seatmate, talking to him, trying to get an idea of what was happening.
And you started leveling out with the Hudson.
Leveling off with the Hudson, and then Captain Sully says those 3 words, brace for impact, in the most sincere voice that anyone could ever speak 3 words.
And then you heard the fear, I think, in the stewardess' mouths, repeating, heads down, brace yourselves, because I don't think they knew it wasn't good.
I immediately hear, even through the hard cockpit door, flight attendants in front chanting their commands in unison in response to my PA. They say, brace, brace, heads down, stay down, repeatedly, over and over again. Brace, brace, heads down, stay down. It comforts me to know that they're on the same page.
I was next to Robbie. He had the aisle seat, and I had the window seat. And Robbie kept turning to me, asking me where the water was, how close we were. And I just remember I was, saying, not yet, not yet.
It was not a moment of peace or life flashing before my eyes. It was how quickly can I pray. It was, forgive me for all my sins. I don't have time to go through them all right now. I'm sure there's a lot, but you're just going to have to take like this blanket under my circumstances, and then just praying for my family and my husband one by one that they would recover from this loss.
I know it's a river, but it's the best I can do. I can only afford to look at 2 things: outside and inside of my airspeed indication. Outside of the picture I'm seeing, inside of the airspeed. Outside, inside, outside, inside, outside, inside. Wings level. Rate of descent has to be survivable. I have to know the right place to begin to flare so that we can touch down without breaking the airplane or hurting people too bad.
You're going to flare it like you normally would to land an airplane on a runway. Obviously, you have to keep the wings, absolutely level, because you don't want to dig a wingtip or an engine in, because that could cartwheel the airplane. So that's absolutely critical.
I thought, one, my wife's pregnant with our first child. Why at this time are you doing this to me? I also thought, I booked this trip.
There are alarms going off in the cockpit that can be heard by passengers in the first-class cabin.
You could hear pull up, terrain, terrain. And that was frightening.
I didn't have any sort of grasp of what it would feel like to have the impact. It was more an emotional journey for me. It was so short. I didn't have time to think about, wow, is it going to hurt? Are we going to explode? None of that went through my head.
You couldn't even imagine how many thoughts run through a human's mind in 2 minutes, because it's crazy. I thought about life insurance policies. I thought about every single thing that could potentially make my wife's life better, you know, and did I do the right steps? But I just wanted to get out of my seat and run up and say, hey, Dad, you know, I love you, or something like that. But you just can't. You're just mesmerized by the thought of, holy cow, I'm gonna die in 90 seconds.
We're right about here where we touched down. Nose slightly up, wings level. It's a fairly gradual deceleration as we scoot across the water. At the very end, turning to the left, the airplane stops, the nose comes down, water splashes over the windshield, and we bob back up, and we sit in that attitude that everybody's seen the photographs of, tail low in the water. The airplane's obviously intact. We're floating. We survived. At least till now. Now we have to get everybody out of the river.
Crippled Flight 1549 is in good hands as Captain Chesley Sullenberger lands the plane on the Hudson River safely. 1549 skids across the water at around 145 miles an hour and slows to a stop. But this drama is far from over. No one knows if the people aboard the aircraft survived.
As I thought to myself, there are people dying right now. My vision is that the fuselage of the aircraft is ruptured and that people are dying from traumatic injury and more so hypothermia. This is what I'm thinking.
I had plane crash on my frequency. That was hard to deal with.
What the controllers couldn't see is that the passengers from Flight 1549 were beginning to exit the plane.
One of the first people out of the door, so the lifeboat wasn't fully inflated. And I thought, okay, I'm a really strong swimmer. I could probably get to the boat and help pull people up. So I jumped in the water and started swimming for the boat, not realizing that when I jump into 40-degree water, you don't have quite the strength that you expected to have. And so I just kind of treaded water and looked around, and I saw another coworker standing on the wing. And so I swam over to him and shouted for him to pull me up.
It was nice to see how the human spirit came through, and, you know, everyone's looking out for everybody. We didn't know anybody there, but everyone was helping everybody out.
We got banged around pretty good, but I just remember saying to myself, this water feels so damn good.
The passengers were coming over to the raft, and my natural instinct was, we've got to get the people out of the water. And I remember pulling a gentleman in, and he was just, the look on his face is something you'll never forget. He just had sheer panic.
10 seconds after that airplane hit the water and people realized they still were breathing, I just think that they said, wow, I have a second chance at this. I just prepared these 90 seconds and talked myself through death and what I do when I die, but now I'm alive. And whatever it takes, you know, somehow we got to continue this dream that just happened to us because, you know, we were given a second chance.
Getting passengers off the sinking aircraft is Sully's first priority, as he recalls during his visit with the salvaged plane.
As I walked into the cabin, I noticed that the airplane was beginning to fill with water from the aft toward the front. The flight attendants in front quickly opened the left and right forward doors and deployed the slide rafts.
It looked like probably the first 10 rows were already gone and in the rafts by the time I went back. Sully was going from the front to the back, looking to make sure that we got all the passengers off.
As I walked aft, I was shouting, is anyone there? Come forward, is anyone there?
And after some period of time, I don't know how long, Sully came by and said, you know, let's get out of here, which I was happy to do because that water was very cold. You know, any part of your body that was in the water just ached. And both Sully and I started walking on the seats just to keep our legs out of the water.
We had successfully landed in the water, but we hadn't solved the problem yet. We hadn't gotten everybody accounted for. We hadn't gotten everybody safely out of the river. I was watching people standing on the wing, and as the airplane gradually filled up with water from all the damage underneath in the back, the wing got a little bit lower in the water. So At first, their feet were wet, then their legs were wet, and it was cold. It was January. The air temperature was in the 20s, the water temperature probably in the 30s. And they stood there waiting to be rescued.
Where he touched down was probably the most advantageous place to be for recovery, for life-saving abilities that existed based on the ferry boat traffic.
Captain Sullenberger meets some of the crew and captains from New York Waterway, the company that rescued most of the passengers.
It was great that your boat was ready, that you were preparing for the afternoon rush hour shift.
Couldn't be any, it was really perfect timing, so to say, And we saw it landing, of course, we kind of like struck an awe. We don't know what to think of. But then when we saw the people jumping out of the plane, we know this is real. So we just took the lines off and that boat is a bit small, but it's fast. Less than 5 minutes we were at the scene.
We were really untied from the dock before all main engines were running. And we were at the airplane in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, it was very fast. I guess the first boat on scene was the Thomas Jefferson, is that right?
That's the boat we're on right now.
As I was approaching, I started seeing people just come out on your wings. And it was like a miracle. These people looked like they were all walking on water at the time. So we slowed it down. We didn't want to wake and disturb anybody. I pulled up to the starboard wing, and I had my deckhand Hector giving me hand signs. I said, I want to get that platform right over top of the wing without hitting it, so that people could walk off and right onto it. And that's what we did.
I went into the port side, and that's when the one guy jumped off, tried swimming to my boat. Then he realized he couldn't, and he went back on the wing.
Right.
So we got him, and then there was a raft that actually I saw starting to go downriver. No one was with it, which was the raft that Sully was on.
Okay.
And the Athena came, we pinned it in between the two boats, and we started unloading everybody between the two boats.
One guy went under. He came up. Now he was soaked from head to toe. Everything just started to freeze up, and he almost like a fetal position. And we had people in a life raft screaming, "You can do it, you can do it!" But he really couldn't. He got halfway up, completely locked. People on the raft or below him was actually pushing him up. My partner reached over and actually just rolled him right onto the boat.
I was grateful that there were not very many injuries during the landing of the airplane. And I was also very grateful that by the time I left the airplane, there were already boats around us and the rescue had already started. And I think everybody was out of the water within, how long?
We estimated 12 minutes people were to safety.
You kind of see everyone was getting rescued. I mean, you see these guys diving into the water with their wetsuits. You're like, all right, if I go in, these guys are saving me, and I think everyone's going to be all right. But I actually saw you guys, and then as soon as I got on the ferry, that's when I called my wife.
I think I was calling everyone and anyone that I could possibly remember the phone number just to say, hey, look, you guys are about to see some weird thing come across the news right now. It's a miracle that it went down this way, and we were part of it.
And if we hadn't had Sully, I don't think it would have ended the way it did. I mean, I have a friend who is a retired pilot. He used to do accident investigation. He told me everything had to go right, and the pilot had to do everything right for there to be that kind of landing with no casualties and no real injuries. I mean, what he did was nothing short of miraculous.
He always told people the most dangerous part of his trip was driving to the airport. I never thought an accident would happen. I never believed that. I think that's why Sully and I were both so surprised. I know he felt that would never happen in his career, and that's not something I worried about ever.
Most people don't. Some 30,000 airline flights occur in the U.S. on a daily basis, and commercial flying is still the safest form of travel. Neither the passengers nor their families ever expected to make or receive calls about an airliner landing on the Hudson River, including Sully's wife, Lori Sullenberger.
He said, I just want you to know I'm okay. I can't talk anymore now, and I have to hang up. I called the schools and just very matter-of-factly said, you know, this is who I am. My husband's just crashed an airplane in New York. I need to come get the girls. I do not want them to have any access to any media. I don't want them to find this out until I come get them. I will be there in 10 minutes. Please bring them to the office and I'll pick them up. So what do you think is going to happen to the girls' report cards?
their grades will have taken a hit because of this event.
I'm just still so surprised at the magnitude of it, and I find myself thinking a lot, you know, why us? Why our family? I mean, it just feels like we've been struck by...
Because I was on that flight that day, and that's the only reason.
The events on January 15th begin to define and reshape the lives of the Sullenbergers, as well as all the families, friends, and co-workers of the passengers and crew. The life change for Lori Leitner included giving up her job as a retail executive.
I found myself having a really hard time getting back to where I had been before, where I cared so much. If I sold pants or shorts or a t-shirt, it just didn't seem to matter.
Well, we've got the fridge.
And I've always really been a proponent of the Red Cross. I told my husband, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to quit my job. I just want to volunteer. I want to start a family. I want to start my life over again. Of course, my husband was like, whoa, 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 like, you're traumatized. Like, let's not make any rash decisions until...
A lot of it is, you know, I mean, you realize how incredibly blessed and lucky we are, not just, I mean, that she, I mean, survived, but, you know, that I have her and that, you know, we're together. So little things, you know, she wants to, you know, not work anymore or whatever, that's...
It's a little thing now.
Yeah,
I'm glad you're seeing it as that now.
That's what I mean. It's like, you know, those kind of things that kind of happens. And so you don't even realize it. It's not like, you know, you don't sit down and they don't have those kind of conversations flat out, but it, you know, you realize it, I guess, at your own speed or whatever.
Surviving the fate of Flight 1549 marks a new beginning for George Morgato and his family.
I just remember coming home, and I mean, my daughters at that time were only 7 months old, and my son, and I just remember, you know, kind of hugging him and not be able to let go, you know, because it's like just happy to be here, you know, see him grow up.
Is that you or Jamie?
This is both of us.
What is that?
No, me and Jamie, which we're married, of course. We have 3 children.
The Chicopee Six draw a family tree to show how their tight-knit group is connected and how many people are in their immediate families.
You couldn't just do 3 lines?
It is. That is. There's Jimbo.
Multiply that number times 155 for the number of passengers and crew aboard 1549, and the number becomes staggering.
Come on.
I hope they understand that this is our first family tree drawing.
The family tree here is a reminder of the significance of saving even one life.
Right, to just have everyone's attention, I'd like to propose a toast to Captain Sully for saving the Special 6 from Chicopee, and as you can see, the effect is a lot more than just 6, because it really is about 56 people that have really affected this. So cheers to Captain Sully.
The successful landing on the Hudson River from an event that could have ended very differently captured the imaginations of Americans, so much so that President-elect Barack Obama invited Captain Sullenberger, First Officer Skiles, and the crew aboard Flight 1549 to his presidential inauguration.
I think this event happened at a time when people wanted change. They wanted to feel hopeful again. And this just added to that same narrative. It was a very hopeful time, after a time when people hadn't felt hopeful for a year or two, wondering if there was anybody we could trust, if people still were capable of doing good and the right thing. And here you had a group of people who seemed like they were capable of bringing about a good outcome and making good happen.
And nearly a year later, grateful hands are extended to Captain Sullenberger upon his return to duty.
At first, the attention that we got was simply overwhelming. And then I think the one word that my family and I used to describe not only the event, but the aftermath was surreal.
On his first day back, Sully meets some old and new friends, including some of the passengers from Flight 1549.
When I met Sully, I asked him one question. I said, how bad was it? He said it was dire. And I said, well, how dire? He said it was life or death, leaning towards death.
We hugged and we talked, and it was wonderful. And I wanted to be able to say that I made the flight home complete with Sully and with Jeff.
We send our congratulations to Captain Chesley Sullenberger on his return to work for U.S. Airways and extend our best wishes to him and First Officer Jeff Skiles as they reunite for Captain Sullenberger's first trip back.
8.5 months after January 15th, Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Skiles reunite to complete what they began. The routine flight taking 150 passengers from New York's LaGuardia Airport to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Good morning, how are you? Got the whole team here. Hi, guys.
They do so with the memory of 1549 still fresh in their minds.
I think this event on January 15th, and the crew and the passengers and the first responders all coming together, working together as a team, reminded people of the potential that exists in each of us. The crew did their job, the plane did its job, and the rescuers did their job. And we finally solved the problem. We finally got 155 people out of the river.
And you keep going back and you keep reanalyzing this thing. It's just much more and more amazing as how well these two individuals work together as a team. I mean, I believe that's one of the tremendous reasons that this was so successful.
And just as they did on January 15th, the two captains prepare the plane for takeoff.
This is Captain Sullenberger speaking. On behalf of myself and Captain Jeffrey Skiles, who's flying as first officer, welcome aboard. We're bound for Charlotte, North Carolina. 1 hour, 24 minutes takeoff and landing. Welcome aboard.